I'm a bad boy.
G'day guys, today I'm going to be changing the oil on the 2015 Mazda BT-50. You probably know about the BT-50s and the Rangers. With the oil changes you can't go over about 10 to 15 minutes because the oil pump cannot be primed, so it can completely destroy the engine. So I'm going to run over the whole process, timing myself. We'll go over the different materials and part numbers as well as all the torque settings, and I'll just show you how I do it. It will take me a little bit longer because I have to move cameras and lights around and stuff like that. Now the first thing I want to say is that normally I wouldn't do this. I would just send it to a mechanic once a year to get the servicing done, just because they can check for other problems and stuff better than most other people can. But if you drive your car a lot or you want to change your oil more frequently, say every 5,000 kilometers, then this is something you might want to do. And the oil viscosity is 5W30. I've got the Penrite fully synthetic 5W30. That cost $104. And I've got the Ryco R2720P oil filter. This was $19.55. This actually comes with an O-ring for the oil filter housing, but also for the sump plug. So this is a good filter to get. I'll link this filter and the oil itself in the description, as well as any other tools that I use. Now, if you are really worried about this 10-minute time limit, what I suggest is that you warm the car up, drain the oil, put the bung in, fill it up, and then start the car again, and then go for a drive, come back, do the oil filter as a separate thing. That way you're not going to get caught up on one item. Not that either of them are difficult, but if you are really worried about it, then put new oil in, put the oil filter in after you've started it up, and made sure that that oil pump is primed. You could do it the other way, where you change the oil filter, but then you will be running the old oil through that brand new oil filter. So I think if you were to go down that road, you'd be better off running the new oil through the old filter than you would old oil through the new filter. So with the 10-minute time limit, we're not going to wait for all of the oil to drain out of the car like you normally would. You can't just pull the sump plug and go get a coffee and sit down for 20 minutes. You kind of have to be attentive to the car. If it helps, set a reminder on Google Assistant or Siri. Start a countdown when you pull the oil sump, 5 or 6 minutes. When that alarm goes off, put the sump in, start filling it up. That should take you less than 3 or 4 minutes, and then you can have the car turned back on within the 10-minute time. The way I'm going to do it today is I'm going to pull the sump plug. I've already gone for a drive, the car is warm. I'm just letting it cool a little bit. I'm going to pull the sump plug, then I'm going to get to the oil filter and change that out whilst it's draining, and then I'll get back to that sump plug. So to save time with this whole process and prevent any hiccups from occurring, we're just going to prep as best as we can, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So firstly, I've cut off the seal for the oil so I can open it without having to worry about this with oily hands. I have a funnel here. I'm going to open this, and then I'm going to have the funnel in, ready to go. This rag is just to stop anything else falling into the engine bay. Now under the car I've got a 13 litre drain pan over there. We have roughly 9.8 litres in the engine, although we probably won't get all of it out. That is a 13mm socket. This is a smaller drain pan for the oil filter housing because some oil will drip out. I've got cardboard layered underneath there just to prevent any overspill, and it gives me somewhere to put down oily gloves or oily tools. Over here you'll see I have rags, towels, brake and parts cleaner, another pair of gloves. I've laid these out more so I can quickly rip them off, put them in the bin and operate the cameras. But if you want to lay out gloves for yourself, you can. I've opened up the plastic bag here just so we don't struggle with it with oily hands, so we can get access to the O-ring. This is easy to access. Got some picks here just to get the old O-ring off. 27mm socket on the extension that I found the easiest. That is to access the oil filter housing in there with a 27mm socket. I've already dropped that wheel splash guard down here, and the wheels are turned to the right just to give better access. Again, cardboard just to put down oily tools and stuff, as well as anything else I don't want to put into the bin. Just these basic steps will make the job a lot easier. One last thing, I've got the keys in the ignition ready to go, just so I don't look around for them later when I'm ready to start the car up. Just be careful of your exhaust when you're doing this. If you've been for a drive, it could be quite warm. So the oil is dropping, and this is 13 litres. We might have about 9.5 litres come out. Just make sure it's nice and central, so when the pressure drops, it's still going to be catching the oil. I put the sump plug in this other drain pan here, which I later forgot about, so that was a mistake that I made. Just putting gloves on now, we can start doing this oil filter housing, 27mm socket and an extension bar. And you can see the oil container is already quite full, only a minute 10 seconds in. So taking this off, it shouldn't be under a lot of pressure, it's pretty easy to remove. And there will be oil that drips out, so have your other oil pan ready. This just pulls straight out, and there is oil in that cup as well. I got it over my tools, which is what I really wanted to do. Didn't regret that at all. Oil filter in the bin. Now that old oil filter's gone, we also removed the old O-ring. You probably could reuse it, but we've got a new one to put in with the oil filter anyway. So we'll get that out, we'll run some oil along the edges of that, and that basically means it'll slide and compress as the lid is turning instead of bounding up. New filter just presses in, it goes either way, it's reversible, and just get rid of any twists in that O-ring. You can do this up with a ratchet, 27mm. We don't need to torque it at this stage, just do it up until it's firm. You can see the oil is basically finished, so already at about 4 minutes 40, you could start topping it up. I waste a bit of time here playing around with the camera and then playing around with the torque wrench. There's no need for me to do this. All I'm really doing here is wasting time, but I didn't actually have a timer set up that I was looking at. I was just sort of counting my head, so I wasn't aware that I was at 6 minutes. I actually thought I was only about 4 or 5 minutes in here. Now I've also lost the sump plug, so again there's a lot of time wasted here with the torque wrench and losing the sump plug. I forgot that I put it in that other oil pan, so once I found that, I then gave it a clean, and once I cleaned it I had to inspect it, only to realise that the O-ring wasn't in the best condition. All of this stuff I should have done straight away, and then I would have been doing it simultaneously as the oil was draining. At the moment, as it stands, the oil's basically drained, so I'm kind of just wasting time. But regardless, it's worth putting on that new O-ring, and then we can start filling up the car. I could have used the ratchet here as well, changing out the 27 for the 13 would have been quicker than using the spanner. Now, when you buy the 10 litre oil, you can pretty much fill in the whole thing, go for about 9 to 9.5 litres. I ended up measuring it with the dipstick, but if you want to save time, go for 9.5 litres and forget about the dipstick, because it will be safe to start. I'm approaching the 13-minute mark here, so another 30 seconds could have been saved. Alright guys, that's good. We'll let it run for a few minutes and we'll shut it off and check the levels. We'll have a look around for leaks and we'll degrease. So I've got a torque wrench here at 25 Newton meters. So 25 Newton meters. It's not a lot. Now 39 Newton meters, we'll jump underneath. Now ordinarily you can probably reuse the O-ring, but I actually noticed a bit of fraying on mine, so I had to replace it. So at the moment I'd say it's about 1/3 to halfway up the crosshatch. So I'm pretty happy with that. I think I'll leave it like that. Alright guys, there you have the oil change. So all up, for me it was about 13 minutes from dropping that sump to turning the engine over. Now, when you turn the engine over, your little oil lamp looks like a little genie bottle. That should disappear within about 5 or 6 seconds. Otherwise, switch the car off. Now, I wasted a lot of time with that because I didn't actually set a timer. I wasn't sure how I was tracking, and in my head I thought I was doing better than I was. I wasted about 2 minutes just playing around with the oil filter when I kind of was finished. I wasted a minute trying to find the sump plug because I forgot that I'd put it in the oil pan, and only then, when I needed to put it back in, did I realise that the washer on the sump plug was a little bit frayed. So it took me another minute to try and change that over because I had a bit of trouble getting it off. From the moment I pulled the drain plug to when I started putting oil back in was 10 minutes and 10 seconds. And again, I wasted a bit of time afterwards with the dipstick, checking the oil levels before I turn the car on. In reality, if you put in about 9.5 litres, you can probably go straight to turning the car on because you will be within the acceptable range. So even with all the mistakes that I made and the lighting and the camera changes and stuff, I still got it done in 13 minutes. I think you could easily do it in about 8 minutes if you did it properly and you were concentrating a little bit harder than I was. From the moment I pulled the sump plug to when I was actually finished with the filter was only 4 minutes and 40 seconds. If I hadn't then messed around with everything, I could have started filling it up straight away and I would have had the engine on within about 8 minutes. So when you're doing the job, you won't be preoccupied like I was, but even if you are and you make some mistakes, it's pretty easy to do it within the 15 minutes recommended. But again, I would be aiming for about the 10-minute mark just to be safe. So all we really needed was a 13mm socket and a 27mm socket, torque wrench if you want for 25 Newton meters on the filter housing and 39 Newton meters on the sump plug itself. If you don't have a torque wrench, just be careful with the filter housing. 25 Newton meters is not a lot, especially if you're dealing with a larger ratchet or breaker bar. For the sump plug, 39 Newton meters with a spanner is a decent amount of force. With a large ratchet and stuff, again, just be careful not to over tighten it. You don't need to worry about the torque settings for the initial setup like I did. I thought I was doing a bit better than I was, so I thought I'd have a play around with the torque wrench. But ordinarily, you just tighten up the fuel filter till the housing contacts the base, and then you tighten up the sump plug and start putting in the oil. You go through the torque settings after you've topped it up and started the car. So that's it, nothing to be scared of. For me, 13 minutes and the car started. No dramas, but again, try and set a timer for yourself on your phone just to remind yourself that you should be looking at putting the oil in after about 4 or 5 minutes worth of drain time. So that's it for this one. It's about $120, $125 worth of gear, and you probably do the whole job in less than an hour, including all the cleaning up and stuff like that. So thanks for watching. These are laid out from the moment I pulled the drain plug to, if it doesn't, turn the car off and you'll have to try and pour. Once I was finished with the fill regularly, because I